Welcome to Talent on Tap. I'm Brendan Brown, coming to you from Anaheim, California, where I am spending the week at Talent Connect 2018. Couldn't be more excited to be here, and even more excited to welcome CEO and founder of Jopwell, Porter Braswell.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start out with a pretty broad but straightforward question.
Yeah.
Let's define diversity. I would love to hear you share
Awesome.
your definition.
Absolutely. So when I hear diversity, the first thing that comes to mind is this big umbrella term.
Yeah.
And I think companies run into a lot of trouble because we all care about a more diverse workforce, but what does that actually mean?
Yep.
And so it's this easy term I think that companies throw out very often. But within diversity, there's every single kind of vertical you can imagine. And so I think companies need to be very clear in what they mean by a more diverse workforce. Are you speaking about gender? Are you speaking about ethnicity? Are you speaking of sexual orientation,
Yeah.
Socioeconomic background? There's so many different verticals within that umbrella.
Yeah.
And in order for companies to make change and to see things actually move within an organization, they have to be very clear in what they mean by diversity. And so that's something that I think is really interesting that a lot of companies don't zero in on, which would be incredibly helpful in this whole entire conversation.
Why do you think people don't define it as clearly or struggle?
I think it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly uncomfortable to say exactly what it is you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because once you identify what that is, you have to find a solution for that particular thing.
Yeah.
But as we all know, building tech companies, you got to build something great, something very specific that people want.
Yeah.
And with anything in life, to be great at something, you have to define it. You have to be willing to embrace those uncomfortable conversations. You have to be able to measure it and then push forward.
In terms of it being a business imperative, through the lens you look at this broad topic on, why is it a business imperative?
So to me, it's simple. Putting aside all of the studies from like McKinsey or BCG that have proven time and time again, more diverse workforce leads to bottom line success. Putting all that aside, to me, if you are trying to change an industry, build disruptive products, if you're trying to engage growing communities, by 2040, the majority of people of this country are going to be people of color. So as your market is shifting, if you don't have representation from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds, all different ethnicities and genders, you're gonna lose.
Yeah.
And so how can you build these amazing organizations if you're not a workforce that's representative of the country?
Thoughts in the response often from a busy recruiting organization or busy company is, we have to prioritize. We don't have unlimited resource. Advice there.
I would say the first thing to do is just look at the numbers.
Yep.
Where are you not as representative as you should be or could be?
Yeah.
And start identifying what those areas are.
Yeah.
Odds are it's going to be across the board, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And so in that context of it being across the board, you don't have to single out one particular thing. Single out several of those verticals and start to truly understand why you got to the point where you are. Now, odds are it's likely because there were two white male co-founders who hired their friends, who hired their friends, and that is what it is. And so I think where it goes wrong is when you don't course correct, when it becomes obvious that something needs to change. So at Jopwell, we need to do a better job of hiring white individuals into our organization. And we take it incredibly seriously because we know we need it. We won't be as good as we can be if we don't have representation from every ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic background. And so for organizations, when they start to isolate, which area they need to focus on, they need to first take a step back, understand how they got to where they are, and then determine how you're going to slice and dice and what you're going to attack, and recognize nothing's going to change overnight. It's going to take years. And that's fine. Diversity is not a one-year mission.
Yeah.
It's for the rest of your existence as an organization. And it's okay to strategize and plan and find partners to help you through that. That's the only way things will change.
So back to sort of defining success for these efforts, a lot of recruiters sort of live and die by, did I close a hire?
Yeah.
Is that the right thing to look at? Like, what are the indicators of success?
Absolutely. So every company, again, it comes down to where are you on your diversity journey? Now, as we look at the funnel of where diverse applicants are coming from, like year over year, how many more people of color applied? Maybe that's success. How many people got to the on-site interview? Maybe that's success. How many people actually got the job? That could be success. And I think companies from the very beginning, need to define their KPIs and what's important, and how do they know that they're being successful on this journey. And so as you want to improve your brand perception, well, let's have a baseline. Why don't you give a survey to the Jopwell users in terms of what they even think of your brand? Now, over the course of a year or two, let's see how that changes. Let's see how our community starts interacting with your brand differently. Let's see if you went from the first year of having 100 diverse applicants from Jopwell apply to 1,000 the next year. And let's start measuring how that funnel is changing as it kind of comes down. And if you start to look at all these pieces coming together as puzzle pieces over the course of a year or two, you'll start to be able to assess where you need to invest more money, pull back from investment, and truly make a business case to the budget holder as to this is what's working, this is what's not working, and this is how we adjust. And it's like anything else. You try things, you test it, you pivot, you learn, you iterate, and you have to think of it with the same mindset that you would any other business imperative.
So if someone looked at that across the spectrum of the recruiting life cycle or what have you, and saw that, like the example you gave, where it's like, yeah, we're getting folks to the table, there's some interest they're not getting through, which I would assume would probably ultimately hurt the reputation. What's your advice in terms of, should that shift the priorities? Should someone in HR and recruiting be like, clearly we have an interview and assessment issue, or like, let's stop sourcing like crazy and prioritize where the issue is or where the bottleneck is?
Absolutely,
I mean,
100%, because it's probably really obvious things that are hard to see unless you take a step back. So odds are, I wouldn't even say odds are, do you have a diverse slate of people in the room to interview these candidates? Do those candidates feel included in that conversation, or do they feel, stressed isn't the word, do they feel intimidated because they don't see others in the room that are kind of asking them about who they are and what their interests are? What are the questions that are being asked to these individuals? Within that JD, what are the most important parts? And are those important parts really what that candidate needs to be successful within your organization, or are you just kind of reading from a script? And so again, it has to be a human dialogue. These conversations need to occur, and you have to be thoughtful about how are you articulating your company's vision and story to these candidates, making them feel comfortable that there's a place for them here. And you have to take a step back if you're getting the diverse applicants, but they're not converting, because it's not that they're not qualified. Something's going on internally.
So let's talk about retention. I can speak about where we are at LinkedIn. Where we focus on recruiting a lot, attraction a lot, and we've been trying to shift the organization to like, let's really have the number that we look at be representation. Obviously, there's inputs to that. It's been interesting to try to shift away from just hire. What is your point of view in terms of retaining, and like what's the complete picture that we should be thinking about beyond making the hire?
Building a diverse workforce happens really well on the entry-level side, right? The campus side. You can hire in classes. So when you hire in a class, you have others that look like you, similar experiences, you have your group, you have your friends that have shared experiences, so you guys are in it, and females are in it together. That's really important, because you feel that you have advocates and champions and friendly faces that will enable you to kind of stick through whatever challenges may exist. And so on that entry-level college side, that cohort hiring works really well. To have a more inclusive workforce on that mid-level side, you have to be able to bring diverse individuals in together as well. Why would it be any different? Because if you start picking one here, one there, different divisions, and there's nobody else that they can relate to on day one or feel like they're in it together with, that's a really challenging thing to then have them believe that they're going to be successful within that organization if they don't see anybody else that looks like them. I mean, there have been a couple of talks around here today where empathy was created when people that are the majority stepped into majority situations, whether it's like a majority person going to an HBCU and recruiting and feeling kind of out of place. Well, imagine if that was your everyday in the organization that you work for. So I think it's incredibly important that if you're rolling out a diversity initiative, you actually hire people so they feel like there's a community there to support them when they start. This has to be a human conversation. We have to humanize this process. And it's really important to be incredibly intentional about how we're speaking about it, how we are communicating to the organization why diversity is important, and how we are actually attracting talent into the organization.
Well, thank you for being here, Port. I have learned a tremendous amount and hope we can continue the dialogue.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.